It's the craze that's sweeping UK and Europe. MasterSpool. Well, that's great, but what is it really and why is it important? We're going to cover that and more today on Maker's Corner. Hi, I'm Brian, and this is Maker's Corner, where I talk about things from our world of creative making. Today we're going to be talking about the MasterSpool. January this year, Richard Horn, aka RichRap, had proposed the idea of the MasterSpool. I have actually linked in the description below his original video and blog post so you can check it out for yourself. Since then, several YouTube sites, including Thomas of Tom's 3D, have talked about or commented on the MasterSpool. But I found most of these sites were either UK or European, so I wanted to see how we could bring the discussion to the States. So let's start by talking about exactly what the MasterSpool is. MasterSpool is a printed filament spool that Richard Horn designed so that you could easily put new filament on it and be able to print from it just like a standard spool. The idea behind it is to reduce the waste caused by all these extra empty filament spools that we have hanging around and clogging up our garbage. Although the nice thing too is he's worked in some additional features into this that regular spools either don't have or haven't implemented as well. Taking a closer look at the spool, you can see it's printed in two pieces that use a thread in order to screw it back together. Now on version 3, it had this 3 channels all the way around it. When you went to put your filament on, the zip ties that secured the filament would fit right into there. You'd be able to screw it back together and then clip off those zip ties in order to use it. Now in Richard's version 4, which is the current version, he has put 3 slots here on both sides, and that allows you to actually slide a zip tie back into place when you're done using your filament and want to take it off the spool. So that way you can re-secure everything before taking this off. Whereas version 3, since there was no slot there, you actually had to take off one side and slide your zip tie down through the channel in order to secure the filament. But you of course risked filament occasionally springing off. Now also, there are these handy cuts that allow you to see how much filament that you're going to have left on the spool. Also, over here, there's a location where you can put a label supplied by the manufacturer, both on the version 3 and on the version 4. Now, this would have filament information like color, temperature, and branding information on it. I found this intriguing because while the rest of this is designed to easily swap out filament wherever you want, most labels that I have seen would be stuck on here permanently, or at least you'd tear them if you try to remove them. Now I see this as Richard providing flexibility to us, the end user, to use this how we want, either as permanent storage for our filament with a handy label area, or as a swappable holder for our filament while printing, while current filament that we're not using is compactly stored. Now for the last, in my opinion, the best feature, there are 3 locations around the rim on version 4 and 1 in version 3 where you can lock your filament in place. These are these small holes on either side here, and since this is somewhat translucent PLA, you can actually see where the channel goes, and it is just enough of a bend that it will not break the filament as you stick it in. So you slide it into one hole, and your filament is pretty securely held there without any filament clips or anything like that. Now this is for 1.75 millimeter filament. For 3 millimeter filament, there's a cutout over the side that is just big enough to kind of snap the filament in place as it kind of comes in from the inside, and it'll snap right in there and secure the 3 millimeter filament. Okay, let's dive in a bit more deeply into why this can be a good thing, and let's look at it in action. I mentioned the reduced waste. All of us have empty spools that are either sitting around or have been thrown away over the years. They're meant to be light and just strong enough to be able to do their job. So they don't really lend themselves too well to being repurposed. With that said, there's actually a really good design out there that you can bolt in drawers to turn these into small parts holders. Aside from the waste though, different manufacturers design these spools differently. Some are cardboard and they may recycle well, but they could have a problem rolling if a side or inside gets dented, depending on where your filament roller is set up. Also, all the plastic ones are designed differently. Lips are different, sometimes the sizes are different or widths. And you might have problems with like designing filament clips to go on the side to universally work on all of them. If you use the MasterSpool, then you have a standardized spool to work with and design around for things like dry boxes and spool holders. Eliminating the spool also means that shipping weight is reduced. In general, that means less cost for the manufacturer, cost savings that they could potentially pass on to us. For DOS Filament or other European manufacturers, this also means that they can send a single spool of filament anywhere in the world for the same flat rate, as long as the total weight is under 1 kilogram. They do this by sending out 850 grams of filament. 850 grams? But I want a kilogram. Okay, that may or may not be a problem for you. There are several manufacturers in the US already that sell under a kilogram now, so not as much as a difference as it first sounds. Plus, those kilogram spools, are they really a kilogram of filament? How much of it is the weight of the spool as well? Well, to find out, let's look at a couple of orders that came in and look at 2 DOS Filament refills. I got my scale here, it's set up for grams, and I got some empty spools to weigh. This one's from Maker Geeks. It's a little bit thinner spool, still really good, but a little bit thinner and lighter. And it clocks in at 205 grams. And I also have a little bit more solid one here, a little bit heavier. This one's from Hatchbox. And that was 303 grams. So to compare those, this is the exact same spool from Maker Geeks. It's brand new, hasn't been used yet. Looks quite full. And it weighs in at 1.17 kilograms. So about 965 grams of filament. And that's perfectly fine. When you order a kilogram of filament, it's not always going to be exactly a kilogram. They have standardized spool sizes that they use, and they have different densities of filament. So you're not always going to get exactly a kilogram. And they'll come pretty darn close though. So what about the Hatchbox one? Well, I got new in box. And is 1.276 kilograms, or about 973 grams of filament. Not too bad. Also, I have another Maker Geeks. Now this one is a bit more solid of a spool, and I didn't have one of these to weigh, but it seemed kind of like the Hatchbox one where it was about 300 grams. Also notice that it doesn't seem as full, even though it is brand new. It's never been used. So we got a denser filament here. And when we weigh that one, it comes in at 1.286 kilograms. So if we figured about 300 gram spool, give or take, and this is an estimate, you end up with about 986 grams of filament. Very respectable. Also, another spool that I didn't have was this Matter Hackers spool. Also new, as you can see. This spool feels kind of in between the two. I'd say it's probably a little bit heavier than the original Maker Geeks one, maybe not quite as heavy as the Hatchbox. So I'm guessing it's about 275 grams or so. And when we weigh it, we get 1.259 kilograms. And that leaves about 984 grams of filament. Again, a total estimate. If this was a 300 gram spool, well then we'd have, just over a kilogram of filament. So since I don't have that spool to weigh, that's still just an estimate. Here's the part I've been waiting for, which is actually opening up these filaments from DOS Filament. Now, again, I said before, they actually ship at 850 grams, and they do that because as long as they can do a package under 1 kilogram, they're able to ship it pretty much anywhere in the world for about 7 euros. So I'm able to get this 850 kilograms of filament for between $25 and $29, which isn't too different from the 975 to a kilogram of filament that I got from other manufacturers. And there's also other US manufacturers that you may pay even more for just 500 kilograms of filament. So it's pretty interesting that I can get a comparable cost from filament that's coming in from Germany. So let's go ahead and crack this open for the first time. Okay, I got 2 filaments, one black and one cherry red. Looks like this is the cherry red. Now I did also want to point out that it did take a little damage in shipping. And this is going to be the first that I am seeing it. And as you can see, they actually packed it with some bubble wrap. Try to protect it. Because again, it has no spool. And it's got to be able to fit on these master spools. And they got to stay somewhat intact. So this thing took a halfway decent beating on the way here. And as you can see, as I'm seeing for the first time, this nice cherry red here, this thing's solid. It hasn't moved. I mean, you can hear it just a little bit, but I'm like really trying there and it is not moving. I'm not even sure they needed the bubble wrap, to be honest. It's got a good vacuum seal, and with 892 with the zip ties, the desiccant, and the shrink wrap. Also notice they got the label there as well. So let's open the other one up. Again, still sealed. Also, and these shipped to me at different dates and times. This one took quite a bit of damage. So this thing's going through the ringer to get here. And you saw the cherry red there was just solid. It was okay to, looks like it was okay to put on the MasterSpool with no changes. Okay, let's see what this one looks like. Edit out that address. There we go. And we get the bubble wrap out of the way, and we've got our shrink wrap, our vacuum sealed black filament. Again, nice and open in the middle. Looks like it's got plenty of room to fit on that MasterSpool. This is just solidly vacuum sealed, and again, it is just not moving. Also comes in at about 892 grams. So let's open one of these up. This should be interesting with this vacuum seal. What's this sound like? Oh yeah, that definitely had some tension in it. So if we get rid of the vacuum seal, okay, now it's acting a bit more like filament. It moves a little bit, of course. Oh, looks like one of the zip ties actually broke there. That's why it's moving over there. Over here, it's still a little bit more solid. And with all 3 zip ties, we're at 859 grams. And it looks like that zip tie added about 1 gram. So this is probably 855 grams of filament. So this one is just a tad loose though, because that zip tie breaking. So let's go ahead and put that right on to our version 4. And out of curiosity, 273 grams of filament used to print that. So they have this area here where you can slot in the little bit of filament that they have extra. That looks like it got a little bit, usually it's a little bit smaller, so it can slot down nicely. I think this is going to be too long. Yep, that's not going to work. So we're just going to see if we can't get that on there. Get 2 of these lined up. Just pop that in that area. There we go. And it slides in just like that. I'm going to go ahead and leave that right where the zip tie normally would go. And we're going to clip that off out of the way. And we screw that in. and we got a filament spool. From there, I would just clip off these two zip ties and I can print from this. And then when I'm done, see it's not quite lined up there. You just back it off just a little bit and you can line it up and you can put new zip ties in right in place, right underneath that filament in all three positions. And you're able to pull that filament off and store it in a much more compact manner. Although, admittedly, like I said, when I broke that vacuum seal, this loosened up quite a bit. So we'll do the same thing here. Okay, so this has all three of these zip ties completely intact, and it's still pretty stiff. It's with those zip ties on, nice and tight like that, it is not moving around very much at all. It's definitely moving. I mean, you can separate it out. It's still flexible. 862. So even if it was 2 grams per zip tie, that's still only 6 grams less than that. That's still 858 grams of filament. And here with the version 3, which weighs in at slightly less at 262 grams. Notice the zip ties are pretty much already in place. In fact, I didn't have to move them at all. It just slid right in there. And this little part right there normally would fit in that hole. The little piece. Looks like it's a little bit off space-wise, but it's not going to be too bad. It's actually going to fit in there. We'll be able to screw on our MasterSpool outside. Looks like it's still slipped loose a little bit, but that's okay. And there you have it. Just similar to the manufactured ones, you see we're at 1.122 kilograms. So we're over that kilogram mark when we've got our spool holder on there. A little bit less filament because it's 850 grams, but it's also a little bit less wide. Width-wise, it's about the same. One other thing about the MasterSpool is that this ends up being a really handy way to be able to store and print those samples that you get from different filament manufacturers. You're able to get it on there, screw it on, and then you have a nice secure way to be able to print that small sample. So that's how the MasterSpool works. Now, so far I've only found 2 manufacturers that actually produce filament for these. One of them was Das Filament. Now they jumped on this right away. It was only a day or two after Richard Horn had posted his video before they sent out a tweet with a picture of their vacuum sealed, as they call it, refill, ready to go and to plug right into the MasterSpool. As you can see, that worked pretty darn well. Now the other manufacturer I found was Push Plastic out of Arkansas here in the States. I found that they are selling 500 gram spools in pretty much all of their colors of PLA. So now that we talked about the good parts, let's talk about some of the challenges that manufacturers are going to face bringing these things into market. First, and probably most obvious, is that they're going to have 2 different SKUs or part numbers. One that is going to be their normal spool, and the other one is going to be a vacuum-packed refill that is going to be able to go on to the MasterSpool. Having 2 different SKUs for a manufacturer is a bigger deal than most people would think, because not only are you have shrink wrap spools that somebody might be sending out, but some manufacturers are actually creating boxes that are meant to be put on shelves. So then you have 2 completely different manufacturing processes. Now, while the manufacturing process all the way up to the spool may be the same, by the time that filament gets down to the spool, they have to make the decision, are they putting a normal spool on or are they putting a MasterSpool on? And then from there, they have 2 different packaging processes that they have to go through to send out to the customers. Also, how do manufacturers even let you know that they carry the product? What SEO terms are they going to come up with to get their search to come up near the top when you're looking for refills? Also, they may have a different section of their website just for the refills because they may not offer them in all the colors that they offer their normal PLA spools. Kind of similar to DOS Filament right now, although they're constantly expanding, so they'll probably catch up. Right now, it is difficult to find out if manufacturers offer this or not. The best way I've found is going to Twitter and using hashtag MasterSpool. You can see a lot of people talking about this, plus the manufacturers jumping in and letting them know that they now offer this product. That's how I found Push Plastic here in the States. I, for one, am actually excited about this concept. I think it's a good way to be able to store your filament as long as you got your zip ties nice and tight. The version 4 is definitely what you're going to want to print out. And I look forward to using this in my own system. How about you let me know what you think about it? Put some comments below. Hit that subscribe button if you like what you see. Give me a thumbs up or give me a thumbs down if you don't like it. That's good feedback as well. I'll see you next time. This is Brian from Maker's Corner.